We're about to talk about keyboards. My goal is to not bore everybody.
I actually think the story is fairly interesting.
There's an overarching question here about it. Have we created a piece of hardware that basically is pay to win for video games? Thanks, Adam. Do that in about 3 minutes and it'll be totally valid.
Not only pay to win for video games, but like undetectable by software.
Yeah, pretty much. But in order to explain what's going on, I need to explain a very specific mechanic
Sputnik,
in an
baby.
extremely specific video
1960.
game.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about Razer and a new keyboard they have out called the Huntsman 3. And it has a piece of inside of the hardware and software. It makes something extremely easy, almost like cheating. There's a video out by this guy named Optimum about how this is essentially cheating in specific video games. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in some tactical shooters like Counter-Strike, there's a mechanic called counter-strafing. And what happens is, in order to shoot with 100% accuracy, your character needs to not be moving. Have you ever played like an FPS where your crosshair kind of moves in and out based on how much you're moving? And that's how much spread the bullets will have. Mm-hmm. Counter-Strike is extremely specific to where you have to be completely stopped moving. And in order to do that, you can't just hold the move right key and let go because your character has momentum as they're stopping. So if you want to be at the absolute top level of this game, you want that difference between letting go of the key and stop moving and having 100% accuracy. That could be the difference between being the top rank. In order to do that, you have to hold the right key, let go, and tap the left key super fast, and that will stop you immediately. It's an extremely hard mechanic to learn. You have to have very precise movement with it or timing with it.
It's a feel thing.
It's a feel thing. And if you overlap those two key presses at the same time, it doesn't work because it's activating both key presses.
To my homies that played a lot of GameCube, there was a mechanic in Super Smash Bros. Melee called wave dashing and wave canceling, where you would basically do the same thing, where you could kind of like manipulate the button presses to like allow you to execute a movement faster, because the mechanic of the game would make you like slide or trip or something, and it wouldn't allow for inputs before you were standing still again. But there was a way to sort of like flick it so that you would be almost trip and then you would fall back and then you could do it faster. And the pros, just like I'm assuming in these FPS games, you basically have to do this if you want to be at the highest tier.
If you're a pro Counter-Strike player, you know how to counter-strafe. And you've probably spent decades mastering it. I mean, it is something where pros aren't even doing it 100% of the time. That's how like specific this is. And because of that, with keyboards, there's been this new fad recently called Hall Effect, which is kind of taking over the gaming keyboard space, where instead of a metal pin that connects whenever each keystroke hits, it's a magnet, and you can adjust the activation point of where your keystroke is. Mm-hmm. So rather than going all the way down to bottom out, 0.1 millimeters down now activates it. And it also has a cool thing where the minute you let go of it, it deactivates it rather than having to hit 50% up or whatever that is. That's one of the things that's helping this. I kind of want to do a short on it on the studio channel soon because they've become really popular. But Razer introduced this newer thing, which is partially the Hall Effect keyboard switches and partially a software where essentially it's only taking the last input that you have. So if you're strafing left and right with A and D, because WASD is your usual movement keys, you can press right and then tap A, and it's now overtaken the D key without having to have any travel for deactivation. It essentially is creating a space that is impossible to overlap key presses, which is the main thing making this really hard to do, and timing. I mean, that's basically it. It's making a keyboard that is a couple $100 and taking years and years and years of timing and practice and making it something you can do almost immediately. You still have to be good at the rest of the game, but it does break this point.
It's like an ultimate disc that has special magnets that only interact with your fingernails. So if your hand is in the right place, it'll snap.
I was going to make a devil's advocate sports analogy as well.
Sure. I'll try.
Because I think this is a piece of equipment, this keyboard, and theoretically if everybody gets this keyboard, then everyone's on the same playing field again, which is funny because it reminds me of in golf, there was a moment where there was these super. Have you seen these like belly putters that are like extra tall?
Yes.
And they will like anchor it into their chest and like use it as a pendulum. They got banned.
Okay.
But there was a moment where some golfers were using them and some weren't, and it felt like there was like a animosity towards like, it's kind of cheating. Like I don't know, it shouldn't be legal, and now they got banned. But it's like if everybody used them, we'd all be on the same playing field. So is it cheating?
Yeah, like
Unless it's illegal. The keyboard.
Well, that's the thing. And here's one example that kind of makes this feel illegal is there used to be this thing called null canceling, which is a script that people would incorporate into Counter-Strike. I mean, years and years and years ago that would do essentially the same thing. But because it was a script, it was considered cheating and it was banned from being used in Counter-Strike games. I don't know exactly how Razer's doing this differently. And in fact, since Razer released it, a company that made Hall effect keyboards extremely popular, Wooting, almost immediately released a software update for all of their keyboards that does something super similar in a couple other cooler ways. What?
In software.
In software, retroactively turning all of their keyboards into having this feature now.
Yeah.
So I'm like interested in what happens. Is Valve itself going to ban this? What's going to happen? Are we in a pay to win kind of place? Is there something that like Valve could do to incorporate this already so everyone's on the same thing? But then that also now sucks for these people that have spent. I mean, you still obviously have to have map sense and proper crosshair placement and all these different things to be good at the game.
But it's one variable that no longer matters as much.
Right. It is, and it's one that's like so specific to like taking yourself to the next level. Yeah, it's one of those like super specific things you just learn for so long. Yeah,
it's one of those things where like, well, this game is an online game. Most people are playing it online, and so sure, maybe for in-person LAN pro matches, you can ban these type of keyboards or say everyone has to use them, one of the two. But when you just have your average player on the internet, you are going to be better than the people you're playing against if you have the keyboard.
Isn't there a way for them to detect it though?
I don't know.
Because if I play like Call of Duty Mobile and I attach a backbone, eventually it'll be like, it looks like you're using a controller. Like we're gonna we're gonna like put you in a room with other people that are using controllers.
That's a USB-C interface, so like it can tell. I don't know about
Is a keyboard not a USB-C?
Well, a keyboard, I mean,
the
I don't know if the computer needs to like validate a serial number of a keyboard.
I think like the only thing that the computer would see is like, damn, this guy is really good at taking his finger
because the input that it's detecting,
putting it on D.
That's why like it was hard for them to detect scripts for a long time because it was sort of like manipulating the key presses themselves.
I do think though, so just to make sure that this didn't feel like just really good marketing to make it seem like, oh, this is basically like cheating, I went to the CS2 subreddit and there's a lot of people who seem to be pretty upset by this. So it does seem like a reasonable thing that at least some people are worried about. But they were saying that because a key can never overlap, the way you would tap and do these different things is so perfect that if you were looking, it would be like the difference in milliseconds would be perfect every single time of you doing it. So is that how they enable something like that? Because even in the best is so close and the best players are that there is some sort of variance in it. But if you're always...
Yeah, but you could code that in.
Well, yeah, I mean, people did. It was called null canceling and they banned it. So like...
I mean, the keyboard, like if they updated to detect...
Oh, you're saying that...
You could code variants too. You know, you can make it so it's like if it's between frames 7 and 14, you could just put it at different intervals between it every time.
Yeah, I don't know. Valorant, you don't need to counter strafe in, so it doesn't really matter. I never learned how to do it. I tried to learn how to do it. It is extremely tough. I'm sure there's plenty of people say it's not that hard, but those people have probably been playing Counter-Strike for like 10 years and have learned how to do
games. It's Counter-Strike, it's Super Smash Bros. Melee. It's games that got released before you could just like patch everything a ton. But Counter-Strike is online, you can patch it, but
I think what's cool about though is watching the players who have been playing stuff like that for so long just be at an absolute next level that is wild. Like even in just Valorant, which probably has like some incredible players who have been playing Counter-Strike before because it's similar, there'll be days where I'm like, damn, I feel like I'm really on, and I'll go into a match and just get crushed and be like, I cannot believe there are people who make me look like I've never played this game before.
Yeah, if you go watch Pro Super Smash Bros. Melee, those people literally all day, like they're in the gym, will train movements on the GameCube controller, just over and over and over
Key
again.
combos.
Just like wave dashing and wave canceling and like
Till they become
crouch
human macro
canceling.
machines.
Pretty much. A lot of the stuff you have to get frame perfect on, so it's just training your muscle memory as much as physically possible.
And this keyboard just does that.
Does it for you.
Without having to learn anything.
How much is this keyboard?
I think it's $180.
Suspicious.
I'm going to
asking
be
for
a
a
pro
just
Counter-Strike
wondering.
player now.
Just curious.
180, I think. Yeah, 180 it looks like for the mini version. What will really happen here is the amount of people that this really does that much to will probably be super minimal, because the majority of people buying this to feel like it's cheating will still suck at the game and all the other aspects of the game.
If you can do this move, I'm not beating you anyway. Like, sure, get the keyboard and let it help you out.
But there are probably
but
some
at the
people
pro level, it's probably gonna suck.
There are people who are in like the top 1% that this might help get them into the top 0.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably not exactly there. I think it's an interesting conversation of just like, when is hardware going to start doing too much, and what are the
you can't you can't just like replace the entire keyboard industry overnight. You know?
Yeah, well, and if it gets to the point where the pros are like, this one does actually help me better, because even if pros are doing this 90% of the time, this is 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Now, does every pro have to use this keyboard, or does every keyboard company have to incorporate this? Are we going to start banning hardware?
I'm sure every esports team is going to be like, we have to use Hall Effect switches.
My guess would be it just gets banned.
I think this specific software one gets banned. I think Hall Effect will stay in.
Yeah.
Because that's a little tougher and just a new technology. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Also to note, a lot of Nintendo Switch controller upgrades or better controllers are now using Hall Effect as well, because the Switch controllers, famously, the Joy-Cons will start drifting because you do enough of these like movements on them, and eventually the parts that are supposed to keep it perfectly centered will just kind of start moving to the side. Yeah. So Hall Effect is the same kind of update where it's using magnets instead, so there's not a physical contact that is like forcing this drift to eventually occur. So they last way longer.
Hall Effect is really cool in the keyboard community, and it's super popular in like keyboard gaming community right now.
Do you know why it's called Hall Effect?
I don't.
Essentially, when you have a magnetic field being intersected perpendicularly by an electrical current, you're going to have some of those electrons pulled to one side of the wire, just because of the Lorentz force. Now, when you have electrons on one side of a wire and not on another side of a wire, we can call that a potential difference, which we can measure as a voltage. So, because the strength of that magnetic field is what dictates the amount of potential difference, it means we can measure the voltage and know how far away those magnets are from one another. I hope that makes sense in the realms of a keyboard. Anyway, thanks for letting me nerd out for a little bit, and back to the show.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think we've officially lost everybody. So.
I got kicked out of calculus because I faked taking trigonometry, and
but you didn't know.
Well, what I did was I took trigonometry through Stanford during the summer online, but I didn't finish it. And but I enrolled in calculus, and I tried really hard, and I failed everything. And at one point, my teacher was like, "David, you didn't take trig, did you?"
Oh,
I was like,
damn. That's like when your dentist is like, "You don't floss."
And you look that dentist in the eyes, you're like, "You fucking know the answer to that."
Well, I think the dentist is usually like, "Do you floss?" And you're like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Yeah, oh, yeah, for sure." And they're like, "No, you don't floss."
Have you ever heard they say, "Do you ever floss?" And you say, "Yeah, religiously." And they're like, "It doesn't look like it." And you're like, "Christmas and Easter."
Sundays.
Like and subscribe and floss your teeth.